Emotion Coaching Children with Georgia Anderson. I'm very, very excited about this interview and this special guest. Georgia Anderson is a Gottman Trained Relationship Educator, and she also created this fantastic course, Know How Mom, and we're going to wait for her to join. I'm going to see if I can add her straight away so I don't waste any time, because I know she's got a limited amount of time today. But as we wait for her to join, here she is, Georgia. That's going to be a great interview. Hi, Georgia.
Hello.
So nice that you're spending this time with me today. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy. Anytime your darling accent is good for me.
Thank you. I'm glad you like my accent. So yes, I wanted to start. There's so many ways to start, right? And I know we only have half an hour ahead of us. So I thought the best way to start would be to say that I found you at a moment where I was not enjoying motherhood anymore. And I would say I was feeling really overwhelmed. And I have 3 kids, and the eldest one was struggling with, sharing his emotions in a verbal way, and he was using his hands more than his voice. And I think I was at a point where I was hiding, and I wasn't able to kind of tackle this issue the best way. So I found you, and I found your course, and I did your course, which is fantastic. And I think that I was trying to think of the most valuable thing that you said during the course, and it was the 40% rule. So I think that's the best way to start, so that us perfectionist mothers who want everything to be like an Instagram story, right, as motherhood, to kind of remove a bit of that guilt of having everything perfect.
Yes, I love the 40% rule. And as you know, I'm a Gottman educator, so I've been through all the Gottman training. And one of my favorite pieces of research is the 40% rule, that we really only want to get it right about 40% of the time. That just takes such a burden off of our shoulders. And why? Why do we only want to get it right 40% of the time? Because the human experience is all about repair. The human experience is about growth. If we don't break down a muscle, it cannot build stronger. So this idea of repair, of getting it right 40% of the time, and the rest of the time, go ahead, make a mistake. We're not always going to be connected perfectly to our children. What the difference is, though, in the happy families is that they use the secret weapon of repair. They don't just say 40% is okay and I can forget the rest. They come back and repair. They come back and they're able to say, that didn't go the way I wanted it to. Can we pull out our magic eraser and try again?
Yes. And just emotion coaching is a big thing. Can you talk us through the different steps of using that technique with your children? How do you use emotion coaching with your children?
Sure. So this has a lot to do with repair, because in order to repair with someone, we have to actually be in touch with our own emotions and their emotions. This is basic emotional intelligence. So the first step to emotion coaching is, number one, to be aware of emotions. I mean, that sounds very simple, but it's not. We are so easily, shelled up. We are armored up because either we grew up in a household where emotions weren't to be shared, especially negative emotions. So number one, becoming more aware of emotions, yours and theirs. So it goes both ways here.
Yeah.
Okay. Number two, recognizing emotions are an opportunity for connection. In fact, they're our best opportunity for connection. And the research tells us that negative emotions are even more a better opportunity for connection. So not being afraid of negative emotions, not wanting to push them down in yourself or your children, but using them as information and opportunity to learn and connect and learn about yourself, to learn about them. The third step is to, once you are able to recognize the emotions, to label them, to say what they are, to put a word to them. There's something that happens in the body-mind connection when you put a word to the emotion you're feeling, or you help a child to do the same thing, that helps release the emotion. It helps the emotion move through the tunnel that an emotion has to. Emotions are moving things. They need to be moving things. And if we can help them move through the tunnel of feeling and come out on the other side, we're all going to be better off. So often
Yeah.
stuck in the tunnel. We want to stop and stamp them down and not feel them. So putting the word to the emotion. Then the fourth step is to communicate empathy and understanding. So that's just a listening skill, a reflective listening skill, taking a guess at what they're feeling. If it's not right, letting them correct you, and listening with empathy to them so that they can move through the tunnel of the emotion. And then finally, and this step is really important, is that we have a boundary. We set limits and problem solve. So it doesn't mean that just because a child's tantruming or feeling something big that they can walk all over us. That's not the case. We also have to be in this conversation with them. And if there is a boundary being crossed, we need to be able to set limits and problem solve with them using our own emotional information. So those are really the 5 basic steps. There's a lot we could say about each one, but that's what they are.
Of course. And when I spoke to my audience about this interview, I got a few questions that came from it. And I think that maybe that would be a good way to kind of practice this emotion coaching by just taking a simple example that might have happened or is happening to us. A child who does a tantrum, a toddler who does a tantrum at the bus stop. Because they've decided to go to the park and it's pouring, and you've decided to go home instead, and they're just melting down. Mm-hmm. So how would you, it's a public space, there might be people around. Mm-hmm. How would you help that parent and that child go through the process of emotion coaching?
Okay. I would say, number 1, give yourself as the parent grace. Recognize the emotion first in yourself. This is difficult. This is embarrassing. This is awkward. My child and I are misaligned. Whatever is most important for you in that moment, be aware of it and state it to yourself and give yourself grace and compassion for this difficult moment. Sorry. Then you are
no worries.
Are ready to turn toward your child. So it's like putting your own oxygen mask on first, right? So first take care of yourself. Notice this is difficult. This is challenging. It just takes a second, especially if you practice it often, of naming and stating your own emotion. So we have the child tantruming. We're like, yeah, this is awkward. This is difficult. And then I can turn toward the child. And in my mind, this is all simultaneous, of course. The bus is here possibly, and the child is tantruming, right? So I can, in my mind, think about what needs to happen here. Do I need to get this bus? Another one won't come for 30 minutes, say that's the case. So I'm just making this up. We need to get on the bus. So in this situation, I would probably recognize this is difficult. I would separate me from my child. My child is having a hard time. They're not giving me a hard time. They're having a hard time. They want to stay at the park. They don't understand. They don't care about the rain. So I'm going to pick up my child and and they're probably kicking and screaming. And I'm going to recognize they're separate from me, and I'm going to carry them onto the bus. And I'm going to think, this child is having a hard time. And people are going to be looking at me, and I'm going to stay separate from my child. And at the same time, I'm going to give my child, I see you're really upset. I know you want to stay at the park. You sound, and when they're in full-on tantrum, it's really not the time to do the full process of emotion coaching. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to go sit them down and hold them and smile at the people around me and help them be more comfortable that it's all okay. This child has just lost their head. They've lost their mind right now. They're just not here. What are your thoughts
Exactly.
on that?
Exactly. It always works when you kind of, I find that also telling the child, look, I see how you feel, but we're gonna enter the bus no matter what. It's not gonna stop from the next action, because I feel at times also that they're so smart, right? And they might feel um, put aside, or not heard. And so saying, okay, we will continue this inside the bus. We'll talk about this later, but we have to take the bus. It's raining. There's no bus for another 30 minutes. And talk them through, and trying to distract them as much as possible by talking them through this. But like you said, at that moment in time of tantrums, we have to be comfortable with the tantrum. My daughter is the one who does the most tantrums, and I was listening to her 2 minutes ago. She was shouting before we started the live interview, and I was thinking, like, what's happening? And I messaged the nanny who's with her right now, and now we have a code for it, and we say she's on, because when it's full moon, usually I've noticed the tantrums are worse. And so she said, it's the moon. We don't know if it's full moon or not. I haven't checked. But we kind of have this code that said it's nothing wrong. It's just a process that she's going through. And we're going through the acceptance. But I've had to communicate also with the nanny that I was okay for her to cry, that it was fine for me to listen to her cry. I wanted her to go through these emotions. And I think that sometimes it's also about talking to the people that help you, and telling them that, like, trying to remove that tantrum is not going to help at that time when they're at the bus stop. You have to just be there, sit down, be next to the child, and help them go through the tantrum.
Yes, I love that. And noticing that that's a normative stage of development for a toddler. They are going through huge growth in their brain. They're learning to separate from you. They're learning all these difficult ways of being a separate person from their parent. And that can become very overwhelming for them. And a tantrum is one way that's when they just can't take it anymore. Sometimes we have something that's so difficult and we can't take it anymore. That's really what I think is happening for them. They're just having this moment of complete overwhelm. So the best we can do for them at that point is to not engage in the overwhelm and to be a present, separate person who can protect and love them.
It is hard. It is hard when you're in public, especially, I find. When you're in the comfort of your home, you can take them in a separate room and sit with them. But in public, especially when you're queuing in the school lane for them to enter the school, and they say things like, I don't like you, to the teacher, or they shout, or they kind of misbehave, and etc. as toddlers. Keeping the composure is very difficult. And I think that was one question that came as well, which was, you talk a lot about connection, and you link it a lot to this cooperation. When there's connection, it's easier for the child to cooperate at any age, right? Whether they're toddlers, or you're a grandmother of 15,
Yes.
right? So what's the age range of your grandchildren?
16 to newborn. So all the way.
Exactly. So you can talk about this, how do you get, that was another question I received. How do you get a child, teenager to listen? And you talk about that a lot in your course in Know How Moms. I'd love to hear that from you.
Well, first of all, I want to start with a question to everyone who's listening. And this is something to consider every time you think, I want my child to obey. Are we trying to raise soldiers? Are we trying to raise obedient soldiers who just do everything they are told? And I know that at times the answer is yes, especially when they're young. But I wanted to raise so much more than that. I wanted to raise creative, responsive, empathetic leaders. I really wanted to raise that, even though the temptation is to want to raise a soldier, right? It's just everyone do what I want. And this goes for married relationships, for couples relationships. It's easy for everyone to just we want everyone to think like we think and do what we think, right? But what would the world be if that were the case? So before you think about the discipline part and the obedience part, think about, what do I really want to raise here? For me, I want to raise an independent, creative, empathetic person. And that means that they will see things differently than I do. And every child, their job is to test boundaries. That is their job growing up. Because
let's remember that it is their job growing
Yes.
up. So when they test boundaries, remember that it's their job. That's it. It's normal.
Yes. They're learning what works and what doesn't. So perfect obedience, check yourself when that is your wish. I know it's easier. It would be nice, but so would be a lot of things that aren't really good for us. Okay? So once we have that understanding, we can look at some of the goals for misbehavior. Some of the goals for misbehavior include wanting attention. They include wanting power. And I don't mean power over. I mean, power, personal power. Okay? They want power. They may want revenge because they feel things aren't fair from their perspective. Or they may have a sense of hopelessness. Those have been kind of grouped as some of the main goals of misbehavior.
And hopelessness, just to clarify, because I wasn't aware of that until I took your course. Hopelessness is kind of this feeling that you're not adequate, right? Is that correct? That you're not good enough?
Yes, or they just feel like giving up, like it's just too hard. I'm shutting down. I'm not going to do anything. Right? So there are some, again, going back to the emotional intelligence piece, that's always where I like to begin. Based on how you feel when your child is misbehaving, you can get a good clue as to what their mistaken goal is. Is their goal one of these things, attention, power, revenge, or hopelessness? And if you find that you feel like there's a fly buzzing around your head, their goal might be attention. They're like, here I am, right? Notice me. We don't want to give them attention when they're doing the misbehavior. We want to give them more attention when they're not doing the behavior in order to minimize the behavior in the future. Okay, another way you can know if your child is their attention or their goal is power is if you find you're wanting to have a power struggle with them. Like, I'll show you who's boss kind of thing, right? And the key to avoiding that kind of a power struggle is to give them more power, give them more choice. So find more opportunities where they get to be the creative one. They get to make the decisions as much as possible. And there's so many things we can give them more choice about. If we're worried about having our ducks in a row and having the perfect family, we will not give many choices because life is messy and children are very messy. So, letting go of some of that and giving them power and choice is a big part of avoiding those power struggles, okay? When it gets to revenge and children, this can go for sibling rivalry, and it can also go with the parent when they're very angry and they're even hitting the parent. They're very upset. They're really trying to get back at us. We can know if we're feeling that, and that's just an increase in that. I'll show you who's boss. It's even more of that feeling. Really, what we need to do in that situation is, of course, set a boundary around hitting or whatever our personal boundary is around those things. We need to make that very clear. I will not be hit, and there has to be a consequence for that. And that consequence, let me add in there, needs to be something like that provides choice. So when you're able to sit with me without hitting, then we can talk about this. And otherwise, we need to stay apart. I will leave the room. I will take you in another room, whatever is appropriate. Another consequence that would be great for revenge, either you keep your hands to yourself or I will have to leave the room. So an either or consequence or a when then consequence are really good ways to give them freedom and choice and power without giving up your own power.
Yeah, I mean the heating has been a struggle for my eldest one. And I find that maybe, that would potentially work when he's older. But right now, if I told him that and if I left the room, he'll just follow me. He'll just run behind me. And I'm using a lot of kind of reward and threats, I have to say. And another question was how can you reduce the amount of reward and threat for them to listen to you better? So you're talking about consequence as a way, but like if the consequence is, for instance, you're not going to have TV tonight or you're not going to get your treat, isn't that a threat? So it's what's the difference there? What should we think about as parents?
Yeah, I would say think of it, if you can, more as a boundary. So if he's chasing you and hitting, I think of a boundary as I go in a room and I shut the door. And and then I say, I can see you're very upset. When you're ready to use words, we can be together again.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's great.
Consequence about taking something away or threatening him, I'm just setting a boundary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our children want to be with us. That's one of their greatest needs, is connection with us. So I don't want to scare them. My goal is not to frighten them and think that I'm not going to keep them safe. But I also want them to know I'm going to keep myself safe. And that's a good example for them, because I want them to learn that down the road as well.
Yeah. And the way you keep your composure, like you were mentioning before, is by checking yourself first, right? And knowing the emotions that are escalating within you. And it can be one of those. It can be also revenge, that you might also feel, like you said, that you're in control, you're in power, and there's this power struggle as well. So acknowledging that, maybe naming it, taking a bit of distance towards that's what works for me, at least. And I know that I might say something I might regret when I feel certain emotions coming at me. I might not be able to name them exactly, but I can feel them. And when that happens, if I can, I'll ask my husband to take over, or the nanny to take over if she's around, just to give myself that break and then go back to it later. But I've noticed that, like you said, reacting on the tantrum straight away or on the misbehavior straight away when they've had the misbehavior, there's no improvement. So thanks for everyone who joined. There's Michelle who's written something here. She said that she finds it incredible how her kids are more responsive to teachers than them as parents.
Yes. I would suggest there that the reason that happens, that the teacher usually has no agenda for the child. They have no agenda. Their job is to love them and teach them during that time of school. And of course, they're dedicated to their profession, but they don't have an agenda for that individual child. Whereas parents, we often have an agenda. We often have something in our mind, this child should be this child should be that. And that's what gets us tripped up. The children sense that, and they sense to measure up that lack of unconditional acceptance.
That's true. And that's something you also talk a lot about in your course, that the expectations that we set with our children, we are prone to being disappointed when we set expectations. So we have to check the type of expectations that we have. Yes. Depending on the age. It has to be age appropriate. And you also said something very important on the way we communicate, is because I'm aware of time, I want to go through the list of questions. For my 9-year-old, it's just never enough. Another 5 minutes, another story, it never stops. What should I do? Alex is asking.
I hear this a lot. And I think some of this stems from the fact that we are becoming better emotion coachers. And then the negotiation starts. And it's just this constant negotiation going on all day long. This is where parents, we can practice our boundary. This is when you need to know your own emotion. You need to coach yourself, right? So another 5 minutes, another story. We need to know, what is our boundary? There is no more 5 minutes. I am done. Mommy is done, and I need my time to go and rest. I am very tired as well. And then hold to it.
And Alex, I'm curious to know if you can share with us, is there something that stops you from holding to it, or do you hold to it when you say 5 minutes and it's over? I'm just wondering if you're still there. I would love to hear that.
Remember, it is their child's job to test the boundary, so they're going to continue to do it.
Definitely. And the hard thing is, I find, is that we try to avoid a certain behavior. Let's say we're in public, so we're trying to avoid, feeling embarrassed, or we're trying to avoid, for instance, for the example of the extra story, the extra time, we're trying to avoid them for doing a tantrum. Alex is saying, I hold to it, but it doesn't stop his behavior.
Okay. So my question for you, Alex, would be, is there a problem with that? As long as you hold to the boundary and you're getting what you need, what else do you need in that situation? He can, eventually the fire is going to die if you stop giving it oxygen.
How long can it take, though? 9-year-old. It means that he might continue for quite some time. So what am I guessing it right, that because they sense that it's triggering us in some way, then they keep doing it?
Yes. All behavior.
Yeah. Alex is saying she doesn't like negotiations. Okay, so you have to start liking negotiations.
Stop negotiating. You simply have to have a boundary around that. I love you, sweetheart. I'm done.
Okay, remember Georgia tonight, Alex, when you put him to bed. And Michelle, I know we are short on time, but we have just a few more minutes to respond to Michelle.
Okay,
but
I just want to add to
yes,
Alex. Sometimes
sorry.
the negotiation can be avoided if you let the child have more power and they design what they want bedtime to look like ahead of time, and then you hold them to it. You negotiate ahead of time and then say, negotiations are over. This is what we decided. We're not talking about it anymore. I'm not talking about it anymore. You can talk to yourself in bed all you want. I am not discussing it with you anymore.
That's good. So you would spend some time before bedtime at a quiet moment and kind of even write it down,
Sure,
if needed be, on how bedtime would look like. And then when he's starting to negotiate, can you take
hold
the
it up.
piece of paper? Okay.
Here we are. I'm not negotiating anymore. Good night. We can talk again.
That's great.
Negotiating tonight.
That's fantastic. I'll use that for sure. Thank you. Alex is saying thank you. So Michelle is saying, what I find a real struggle is my 4-year-old would not stay beside me on the street. He runs off and scoots off and will have a meltdown or have a tantrum in the street.
Well, parents are first and foremost responsible for safety. So obviously the answer is that we pick the child up and bring them back off the street, no matter what the behavior is, right? We're responsible for safety first. My next step in that situation would be to firmly turn and make sure I'm on the child's level and face the child and tell them my feelings. Get in touch with my feelings. Okay, I'm putting myself there right now. Improvise, and I'm going to say, I was so frightened to see you in the street because anything could happen. A car could come, a truck could come, anything could happen. I was so frightened to see you in the street. I need you to stay by me. And then the child's going to say something. I don't know what. They're going to have an opinion about this, and you can listen to their feelings. If you were chasing the ball ran away, whatever it is, or you wanted to run away from mommy. You wanted to be free. Okay, whatever it is, you can reflect that feeling, and then you can come back and say, I see you wanted to be free and you wanted to make choices. That's great. I cannot have you run in the street. And then you can, when then a conversation consequence, or either you stay off the street or you will have to hold my hand the entire time or something. You know, there has to be some way to help them learn the safety boundary there.
Michelle, I hope that was helpful. So we're approaching the half an hour mark, and I wanted to finish on time. And I hope that everyone who joined found it as useful as I've found Georgia. Since how long has it been now that we've been talking to each other? Maybe over a year.
Yeah, it's
And
just
make sure you check. Yes. Make sure you check the course that I was talking about, Know How Moms. It's on the link on your bio.
yes,
And
the course is actually called Know How Coach. And it's by far the least expensive way you can get 3 coaching sessions, plus you get all the information in the course. So it's my special deal because I feel it is so important for parents. I want to see parents succeed and be happy.
yes, I love how you changed it to coach, because it's at the end of the day, it's not just for moms, but it's for dads as well, or for parents, let's say, whatever sex they might be.
Right.
And that's very powerful, because we need our partner for this to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you want to share with our audience on what you're working on and how they can find you and connect with you?
Oh, I'm just at georgiaandersoncoaching.com, and we do lots of getaways and online classes. And my favorite thing to do is coach amazing individuals who really care about being changers. That's my true passion, and it's just an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. Yes, for relationship also with your partner, you're doing great retreats. It's a bit far for me here in the UK,
Yes.
but when I check Georgia's Instagram, because as well as amazing tips, she posts fantastic pictures of Utah and the landscape and walks, and it's just beautiful. It makes you travel just by looking at her page.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, we are doing a Caribbean cruise for anyone who's interested in over Valentine's Day. So that will include the whole Gottman 7 Principles course, plus lots of cruise fun and activities. So that's
amazing.
Yeah.
One day I'll join you for sure. Thanks again for your time. Thank you everyone who joined. You can watch the replay and contact Georgia directly on her Instagram.
Thank you, Tanya.
Have a great evening, everybody, or day, wherever you are.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.